The morning light slanted through the thin curtains of Maya Carter's kitchen, touching the chipped rim of her favorite mug, a pale blue cup with a faint crack that had survived 3 apartments and 5 years of lesson plans. The kettle whistled softly as she hummed an old gospel tune, her voice low and warm, half prayer, half habit. The rhythm of her life was built on small rituals like this, things that steadied her before the world asked her to teach, nurture, and carry the invisible weight of being both a black woman and a symbol of patience in a town that tested both. Millstone, Alabama, was the kind of place where time moved slower than truth. Every building wore history like dust, and every face seemed to remember who used to live on which side of town. Maya had been here long enough to know the patterns. The store clerks who called her sweetheart, but followed her down aisles, the mothers who thanked her for teaching their children, but flinched when she mentioned race in a lesson. She never fought those moments. She simply marked them quietly. Like tally marks on a wall, she refused to let cage her spirit. Her classroom was her sanctuary. Inside those 4 walls, she could rewrite the world, at least for a few hours a day. Posters of poets and scientists covered the chipped paint. Langston Hughes, Mae Jemison, James Baldwin. The kids, 12-year-olds with too much energy and not enough faith in themselves, adored her. To them, she was a calm center in a storm. She laughed easily, corrected gently, and carried herself with the grace of someone raised to believe that dignity was its own form of power. That Friday, she'd stayed late grading essays about courage. One boy, Jamal, had written, "Courage is when my mama still goes to work after people yell at her because of her skin." Maya had read that line twice, her throat tightening. When she looked up, the empty classroom seemed to echo it back. Courage as survival. Courage as quiet endurance. She packed. That, she had to stop by Henderson's Market for a few things. Milk, sugar, and the herbal tea her mother loved. She almost didn't go. There was a newer, friendlier grocery store across town, but Henderson's was closer and cheaper. Besides, she'd been shopping there for years. She knew which aisles had the fresh produce and which ones creaked under her steps. It wasn't perfect, but it was familiar. A kind of uneasy peace like walking through someone else's house that you've memorized but never been invited into. Before leaving, Gloria called out, "You hold your head high in there, you hear? Folks see your grace before they see your skin." "I know, Mama," Maya said softly, smiling. Always. The sunlight was bright as she got in her car. Her reflection briefly caught in the window. Composed, calm, the kind of woman who never expected trouble because she never looked for it. But beneath that calm lived a quiet readiness, the kind inherited from generations who had learned to smile through storms and walk with purpose through rooms not meant for them. As the radio hummed a slow soul song, Maya didn't know that by the time she returned home, her face would be on every screen in Millstone. She didn't know that one calm act, one refusal to break, would ripple through the town's conscience like a stone dropped in still water. All she knew was that she needed milk, tea, and a few hours of peace. 3 simple things that should have cost her nothing. The bell above the glass door jingled as Maya stepped into Henderson's Market. The sound was sharp, metallic, a little too loud for a store so quiet. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and overripe bananas. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving everything a faint hum, like the world was holding its breath. Maya reached for a shopping cart, its wheel squealing in protest. She smiled to herself. The same wheel had squealed for years, a stubborn little reminder that this store never changed. Henderson's Market was one of tea. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled, exhaled. Not today, she told herself. Not for this. By the time she reached the register, she had gathered her small list: milk, sugar, and the herbal tea her mother liked. Evelyn was ringing up another customer, a young mother with a toddler who smiled shyly at Maya. The little boy waved. Maya waved back, warmth flickering for a brief moment. Then she heard it. The sharp voice cut through the air like a blade. "Excuse me, I was next in line." Maya turned. A woman stood behind her, late 40s, expensive haircut, posture sharp enough to draw blood. She held a basket overflowing with items. Maya glanced at the floor markers, the kind installed during the pandemic to show where to stand. She was exactly where she should be. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Maya said gently. "I believe I was here first." The woman's lip curled. "Don't get smart with me. I've been waiting." Evelyn looked up, surprise flickering into discomfort. The guard, still hovering near the end of the aisle, straightened his stance. The room seemed to shrink, every eye turning toward the two women at the counter. "I'm not trying to argue," Maya said evenly. "You can go ahead if you'd like." But the woman didn't move. Her anger wasn't about the line. It was about the audacity of being spoken to by someone she'd already decided was beneath her. "I don't need your attitude," she hissed. "People like you always think the world owes you something." The words dropped like stones. Evelyn's eyes darted nervously between them. And then, the oldest betrayal of all, she chose the easier side. "Maya," she said softly, her voice tight, "let's just keep the peace, okay? We don't want any trouble." There it was. We. That word that drew the line in invisible ink. Who belonged, who didn't. Maya's chest tightened, but her face remained still. She nodded slowly, letting the silence hang heavier than anger ever could. Around her, customers pretended to browse, but watched every second. Pamela Green. Gone. Only the sound of Maya's calm breathing remained, steady and unbroken, in a room full of people who had never seen power look like that before. The air inside Henderson's, and with that, the store fell completely silent. The hum of the lights, the buzz of the refrigerator, market seemed to curdle, thick with that particular kind of silence that only comes when something sacred, human dignity, is being tested. The guard, a young man named Carl whose eyes betrayed more fear than authority, shifted uneasily as he approached Maya. His hand hovered near her tote bag, as if even he wasn't sure he wanted to touch it. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice shaking, "I'm going to have to ask you to open your bag." Maya stood still. Her body was calm, but her heart thudded in her chest like a slow, steady drum. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "The way they come for you isn't always with chains. Sometimes it's with shame." She met his gaze. "Is that store policy?" she asked. Her tone wasn't defiant. It was measured, precise, the way a teacher might correct a student without embarrassment. Evelyn's voice came from behind the counter. "We've had incidents before. You understand, Maya, it's just protocol." Protocol. That word, soft, polite, dripping with hypocrisy. It was the word people used when they wanted cruelty to sound official. "I understand," Maya said, "but you saw me walk in with this bag. You watched me the entire time." Pamela stood a few feet away, arms crossed, lips pressed in satisfaction. "If she's got nothing to hide, she shouldn't mind a little check," she said loudly, performing for the crowd that had gathered. Maya inhaled slowly. Her mind moved faster than her pulse, calculating, remembering the lesson her mother taught her years ago after a traffic stop that went wrong for someone they knew. They'll expect anger. Don't give them that. Give them clarity. "All right," Maya said finally, voice steady as steel wrapped in velvet. She set her tote on the counter. "You can check it. But before you do, I need you to call the police. I want a record that this happened." Evelyn blinked, thrown off balance. "There's no need for that." "There is," Maya interrupted gently. "If you're accusing me of theft, we need witnesses. We need evidence. We need your cameras." Someone in the crowd muttered, "She's got a point." The words broke something in the air. Eyes that had looked at Maya with suspicion began to flicker with uncertainty. A few people raised their phones higher, capturing the entire scene. Pamela's face tightened. "This is ridiculous. She's making a scene." But Maya didn't move. Her hands were still, her eyes unwavering. "A scene," she said softly, "is when someone screams in a store. I'm just standing here." Evelyn hesitated, then nodded at Carl. "Just go ahead." Carl reached into the tote, his hands trembling as he lifted out a notebook, a water bottle, a small pouch of change. No Ehrungs, no stolen items, nothing but the ordinary tools of a woman living an honest life. When he found nothing, his shoulders sagged. "It's clean," he said. Pamela scoffed. "Maybe she hid it somewhere else." That was when Maya turned fully to her, calm, unblinking, her voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through every inch of noise. "You should be careful with your words, ma'am. Lies have a way of finding their way home." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The sound of a phone notification pinged from somewhere near the back. A small reminder that this moment was being watched, recorded, multiplied. Evelyn cleared her throat. "I think that's enough now. We're all a bit worked up." "Worked up," Maya repeated, her voice almost breaking from the weight of restraint. "You humiliated me in front of this entire store for what? A feeling? A stereotype?" Her composure wavered for the first time, but she caught it, pulling her breath back into herself like someone tightening a thread before it snapped. "All I wanted was tea for my mother." The silence that followed was heavy with the kind of shame that is nowhere to go. Pamela grabbed her bag and stormed out, muttering something about playing the victim. The door slammed so hard that the bell above it shuddered. Maya turned to Evelyn, who looked smaller now, her authority crumbling under the weight of her own cowardice. "You should keep the tape," Maya said quietly. "You'll need it." Evelyn frowned. "For what?" "For when the truth comes knocking," Maya replied, gathering her things. As she walked out, the crowd parted like a tide, some faces guilty, some supportive, most uncertain. The afternoon sunlight hit her face as the door closed behind her, warm and harsh at the same time. Outside, she sat in her car, hands trembling at last. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked different, older, maybe, or just tired of being expected to forgive. She wanted to scream, but she didn't. She just exhaled, slowly, until her heartbeat matched the rhythm of her breath. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from one of her students' parents. "Saw the video. Standing with you." Maya stared at the screen, realization dawning that the humiliation she'd endured inside that store was no longer confined to four walls. It was spreading, through phones, through words, through the conscience of a town that had never truly seen itself. And for the first time that day, she didn't feel small. She felt still, like the calm before something larger than herself. Night fell quietly over Millstone, but the town didn't sleep. The video, 38 seconds long, grainy, and electrifying, had already begun its slow, viral crawl through the internet. It started local, a Facebook group called Millstone Happenings, where residents usually shared lost pets or church bake sales. Within an hour, it had been shared 200 times. By morning, it would reach thousands. In the video, Maya stands perfectly still while chaos builds around her. Pamela's shrill voice slices through the air, "People like you always think," before the clip cuts abruptly. But what remained burned into people's minds wasn't the insult. It was Maya's silence. Her eyes steady, her breathing measured, her restraint louder than any words she could have spoken. At first, Maya didn't even know she'd become a spectacle. She spent the evening at home, her mother asleep in the next room, the house filled with the faint hum of an old fan and the sound of crickets. She washed the dishes in silence, letting the warm water calm her trembling hands. But her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, missed calls, a notification from a former student. "Ms. Carter, they posted what happened. Are you okay?" Her chest tightened. She clicked the link. There she was, frozen in digital amber, her dignity dissected frame by frame. The comments were a storm. She handled that like a queen. Typical race card nonsense. "This town's gonna have to answer for this one." Maya closed the app and leaned against the counter. The world was watching, and not by her choice. By morning, reporters had gathered outside Henderson's Market. The local news van parked crookedly near the entrance, its satellite dish pointed toward the sky like an accusation. Evelyn had released a statement, something about a misunderstanding, about emotions running high. Pamela Green's name was now trending, though she'd locked all her social media accounts overnight. Maya didn't plan to say anything. She didn't want interviews, hashtags, or marches. But when she arrived at school Monday morning, she found her students waiting for her, not with chatter or laughter, but with silence. A quiet kind of reverence filled the room. A boy in the back, Jamal, raised his hand. "Ms. Carter," he said softly, "they shouldn't talk to you like that. My mama said you stood tall." Maya blinked back tears. "Thank you, Jamal," she said. "But what matters most is how we stand, not how loud." Still, by lunchtime, the principal called her into his office. Mr. Langston was an aging man with a kind face but cautious eyes. "Maya," he began, "this thing's gone big. The district's asking questions. We just need to make sure you didn't, well, provoke anything." The word struck harder than the insult in the store. Provoke. She'd done everything right, and still, somehow, she was being measured for blame. She nodded politely, folded her hands, and said nothing. Afterward, she drove home, passing the store where it all began. A small crowd stood outside now, some holding signs, others taking selfies. A young black woman shouted through a megaphone, "We are not thieves. We are not threats." Maya slowed her car, her chest swelling with something between pride and fear. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted truth. That evening, she met with a friend from her university days, Malik Bryant, now a civil rights attorney based in Birmingham. They met in a quiet cafe. Maya smiled faintly. "And yet, one woman can still accuse me of stealing tea, and suddenly I'm a suspect again." "That's exactly why we fight," Malik said. "They thought you were small because you don't raise your voice. They have no idea how much power you hold." Maya looked down at her hands, the same hands that had held chalk, comforted children, and now carried a cause she never asked for. "I never wanted a fight," she said. "You didn't start one," Malik replied. "You just refused to bow your head." As he spoke, Maya's phone buzzed again, this time from an unfamiliar number. A reporter from Montgomery wanted to speak with her, then another from Atlanta, a producer from a national morning show. Her story was spreading like wildfire, and she could feel the heat rising around her. But underneath the fear, something steady grew. That same quiet strength her mother had carried in Selma. The same composure she'd seen in the faces of history's silent warriors. She wasn't going to shout or curse or burn anything down. She would do what she'd always done, teach. Only now, her classroom was the entire country. When she drove home that night, the streets of Millstone looked different. Store lights flickered like nervous eyes. Bystanders watched her car pass, unsure whether to wave or look away. And in that uncertain silence, Maya realized the shift had already begun. For years, this town had whispered its prejudice behind closed doors. Now, because she had stood still, it had been dragged into the light. By Tuesday morning, Millstone wasn't just a small southern town anymore. It was a headline. Teacher profiled in grocery store. Town divided over viral video. News trucks lined Main Street, their satellite dishes crowding the skyline like silver horns. Henderson's Market, once a quiet family business with faded red signage and dusty aisles, had become a flashpoint. Reporters stood near the entrance, microphones poised, rehearsing their lines while customers slipped in and out, pretending nothing had changed. Inside, Evelyn Henderson's hand shook as she scanned groceries. Her usual chatter was gone. Each beep of the register sounded like a countdown. Cameras had been posted outside since dawn, and every hour brought a new wave of protesters holding signs that red dignity is not a threat in shop, while black equals suspicion. Pamela Green hadn't been seen in days. Rumors said she'd taken a leave of absence from her job at the bank. The town paper reported she'd received threats, but no one seemed to remember the threats Maya had endured long before the video. The subtle ones that came in polite voices and tight smiles. At home, Maya watched it all unfold from the small couch in her living room. The local anchor replayed the footage over and over, dissecting her tone, her posture, her composure, as if her dignity were a strategy rather than instinct. Her phone vibrated constantly. Former students sent voice notes. "Ms. Carter, you're trending on TikTok. My mom said you're a hero. We love you." Other messages were less kind. Anonymous numbers. Harsh words. "You people always playing victim. Hope you're happy destroying a small business." She muted her phone and went out to her porch, where the air smelled of rain and magnolia. Across the street, a neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, an older white woman who'd lived there for 40 years, waved awkwardly. Maya hesitated, then waved back. It was a fragile gesture, the kind that said, "I don't know how to talk about this, but I see you." That night, She found herself at her mother's house again. Gloria was sit. Gloria reached over, clasping her daughter's hand. And that's exactly why this matters. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't curse. You stood your ground with grace. That's power they can't explain, so they call it disruption. Tears welled in Maya's eyes, but she blinked them back. It's just, I keep thinking about my students. What lesson are they learning from all this? Her mother smiled faintly. That sometimes standing still makes the loudest noise. Meanwhile, Malik Bryant was working behind the scenes. He'd started a petition calling for an investigation into Henderson's Market, citing a history of racial bias. Old stories began resurfacing, complaints ignored, employees underpaid, customers quietly humiliated. The footage had opened a wound, and now the infection was visible for all to see. National media caught wind. CNN ran the headline, "Alabama Teacher Humiliated, Stand Her Ground with Dignity." A talk show invited Maya to appear. She declined. She wasn't interested in being a spectacle, but she agreed to one interview with a journalist from Atlanta named Renee Lawson, known for her deep, compassionate reporting. They met at a small park near downtown. Cameras rolled, but Renee's tone was gentle. "You never raise your voice," she said. Was that intentional? Maya paused, considering. Where I come from, raising your voice doesn't make people listen. It makes them afraid. So I learned to use silence instead. It makes them hear their own words. The clip aired that evening and went viral almost instantly. Silence as strength became the headline. The image of Maya, poised, calm, and unbroken, became a symbol for quiet resistance. But symbols come with burdens. Her mailbox overflowed with letters, some filled with gratitude, others with hate. The school district put her on temporary leave, pending review, claiming they needed to ensure a distraction-free environment. It was meant to protect her, but it felt like exile. Still, allies emerged. A coalition of local churches formed a support group. College students from nearby Montgomery marched through Millstone holding candles. The crowd was diverse, black, white, brown, united by a sense of reckoning long overdue. In one corner of town, Evelyn Henderson watched the protest from her window. Her son asked, "Mama, why they mad?" Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't have words for the thing she'd always known but never named. As night fell, Maya stood at her window, watching the faint glow of candles moving down the street. The chants drifted through the open air, not angry but steady, rhythmic, human. She didn't join them. She didn't need to. Her silence had already spoken. But deep inside, beneath the calm, a new resolve was forming, sharp, deliberate, unshakable. They had turned her into a headline. Now she would turn that headline into history. The morning the letter arrived, the air was heavy with August heat. It wasn't just warm, it clung like something that didn't want to leave. The envelope lay on Maya's doorstep, official seal glinting under the sunlight. Millstone School District Board. She opened it with steady fingers. The words were polite, bureaucratic, the kind of language that sounded clean but stung deep. Pending review of the ongoing investigation and to maintain neutrality amid community tensions, you are hereby placed on indefinite leave without pay. For a moment, Maya just stood there, barefoot on her porch, cicadas humming all around. She had expected it, maybe even prepared for it. But seeing it written, seeing her name followed by words like indefinite and without pay, was another wound entirely. She folded the letter, placed it on the table, and sat down. The clock ticked softly on the wall. Her grandmother's Bible sat beside it, its spine cracked and pages marked with faded underlines. Maya opened it without thinking, her hand stopping on a verse she'd memorized long ago. Let justice roll down. "Malik," she said, voice low but steady. "They suspended me. No pay." There was silence on the line for a moment, the sound of someone thinking, measuring. Then his voice, "Good. That means they're scared. Now we move." Within days, a small team began forming around Maya. Malik reached out to Renee Lawson, the journalist from Atlanta. She connected them to a network of civil rights attorneys and legal aid advocates who had experience with racial discrimination cases. One of them, attorney Carla Gaines, agreed to take her case pro bono. Carla was sharp, composed, with silver braids and eyes that missed nothing. When she first met Maya, she spread the school board's letter and the viral video across the table like puzzle pieces. They thought they could silence you with paperwork, Carla said. They made a mistake. Malik leaned forward, a laptop open before him. We've got more than just the store video now, he said. I've collected statements, students, parents, even one of Henderson's employees who says they were told to keep an eye on certain customers. We build a pattern, not just an incident. Carla nodded. Perfect. We'll file a dual complaint. One with the EEOC for workplace retaliation and one with the Department of Justice for civil rights violation. But we need one thing first, a record of prior misconduct. That's when Maya remembered something. A student's mother, years ago, told me her son was followed by the same cashier. She never reported it because she said, "What's the point?" Maybe it's time to ask. Over the next week, Maya and Malik drove through Millstone and surrounding towns, meeting people quietly, former employees, customers, even an ex-manager of Henderson's Market. Each story echoed the same quiet pattern: humiliation, dismissal, silence. Carla turned these testimonies into affidavits. Malik uploaded documents to encrypted drives. Renee kept the media at bay, running subtle but steady stories that framed the case around accountability, not outrage. Then came a town hall. The mayor had called it to restore calm, but when Maya entered the community center, the air was electric. Reporters lined the back wall. Residents filled the seats, some clutching "We Stand with Maya" signs, others crossing their arms, wary and tight-lipped. Maya didn't plan to speak, but when a board member, a tall man with polished shoes and a rehearsed smile, said, "We believe Ms. Carter's situation has been exaggerated by outside influence," something in her rose. She stood quietly. The murmurs died down. With respect, she said, "I've lived here my whole life. I've taught your children. I've shopped in your stores. If truth counts as outside influence, then maybe we need to ask what's inside." The crowd fell silent. Cameras caught it, the calm fire in her eyes, the unwavering poise in her voice. It wasn't anger. It was truth, stripped bare. That night, Carla filed the legal documents. Malik released a digital dossier titled The Millstone Pattern, compiling every recorded instance of racial bias in local businesses and schools over the past decade. It went viral. The next morning, the Department of Justice announced it was reviewing claims of systemic discrimination in Millstone County. Evelyn Henderson closed her store that day. Pamela Green issued a written apology. But Maya knew apologies were easy. Accountability wasn't. As she sat on her porch that night, the cicadas quieter now, Malik sent her a text. "The DOJ investigator wants to speak with you tomorrow. You ready?" She looked out into the still, warm dark. "I've been ready my whole life," she whispered. And for the first time since that day in the store, she smiled. Not from victory, but from certainty. Justice was coming, and this time, it would have her name on it. The courthouse in Millstone had always felt like a relic, a pale brick building with chipped columns and an old clock that hadn't told the right time in decades. On this morning, though, it pulsed with life. The steps overflowed with people, locals, reporters, activists, all drawn by the same pull. Justice, long delayed and now demanding space. Inside, the temperature felt tense. The courtroom buzzed like static, each whisper crackling against the marble walls. Maya sat at the front, hands folded neatly on the table before her. Her expression was composed, but beneath that calm exterior was the steady rhythm of a woman who had been silenced too many times and finally refused to be quiet. Beside her sat attorney Carla Gaines, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Malik was 2 rows back, laptop open, live-streaming updates to the thousands following the case online. Across the aisle sat the defendants. Henderson's Market, represented by Evelyn Henderson's son, and the Millstone School Board, looking like men and women accustomed to being in control. The judge entered. Court is now in session. It began slowly. The prosecution laid out the timeline, the viral video, the public humiliation, the school's decision to suspend Maya without cause. But then Carla began to weave the pattern together. The testimonies, the affidavits, the data showing a decade of bias in Millstone's institutions. At one point, Carla projected a slide on the screen, a map of the town with red dots marking every recorded incident of discrimination, denied service, racial profiling, e. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned forward. Then Evelyn Henderson took the stand. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone. "Mrs. Henderson," Carla began, her tone respectful but precise. "How long have you owned Henderson's Market?" 32 years. And in those 32 years, have you ever implemented any training regarding racial bias or profiling? Evelyn swallowed hard. "No, ma'am. We're a small town. Never thought we needed it." Carla's gaze didn't waver. Until now. A murmur rippled through the room. Evelyn looked down, her eyes wet. "I didn't know what my employees were doing. I didn't mean for anyone to feel unwelcome." Carla's voice softened. "Intent doesn't erase impact, Mrs. Henderson. That's what this case is about." When it was Maya's turn to testify, she walked to the stand with slow, deliberate steps. She took the oath, sat down, and looked out at the room. The same faces that once looked through her in grocery aisles and PDA meetings. Carla asked, "Ms. Carter, why didn't you react that day in the store? Why didn't you raise your voice?" Maya paused. The room was silent, waiting. "Because I was tired," she said finally. "Tired of having to prove I belong. Tired of being told to calm down when I was never loud. Sometimes the loudest protest is dignity." The words hung in the air, quiet but thunderous. Reporters scribbled furiously. A young woman in the back row wiped her eyes. Then came the turning point. Carla called a surprise witness, a young man named Devin James, a former store clerk. He stepped forward nervously, glancing at Maya before facing the room. "I worked there 3 years," he began. "We were told, not in writing, but, told, to watch the ones who might be trouble. And we all knew what that meant." Carla leaned in. "What did it mean, Mr. James?" He looked down. "It meant watch the black folks." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Evelyn buried her face in her hands. By the end of the day, the courtroom felt transformed, not by shouting, not by spectacle, but by truth made undeniable. The judge called for recess, but the murmurs in the hallway carried a single current. Millstone had been exposed. That evening, the courthouse steps were lit by phone screens and candles alike. News anchors spoke into cameras. Protesters held signs. And when Maya stepped out into the crowd, a hush fell. Someone shouted, "We love you, Miss Carter." She smiled, small but real. "This isn't about me," she said, voice carrying in the night. "It's about everyone who's been told they don't belong in the place they already built." A chant began to rise, soft at first, then rolling through the streets. Dignity is not a threat. Justice is not a favor. In that moment, under the courthouse lights, Millstone felt like it was holding its breath, caught between the past it refused to face and the future it could no longer avoid. Maya stood tall, surrounded by her people, her voice clear and calm, the same calm that had started it all. The verdict came on a gray morning, the kind of morning that carried a hush. No birdsong, no breeze, just the low hum of anticipation pressing against the windows of the courthouse. Maya sat quietly beside her attorney, hands folded in her lap. Her heart wasn't racing anymore. It beat steady, certain, like a drum that had learned patience through years of silence. The judge entered, the jury filed in, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The courtroom air was heavy, thick with what this moment meant. Not just for Maya Carter, but for every quiet humiliation that had ever been buried beneath small-town courtesy. The forewoman stood, paper trembling slightly in her hand. In the matter of Carter versus Henderson's Market and the Millstone School District, she read, "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff." A sound rippled through the courtroom. Not a cheer, not applause, but a release. A collective exhale that had been years in the making. Maya closed her eyes. Carla's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Malik let out a breath that sounded like a prayer. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp and clean. "Let it be known," he said, "that this court finds that discrimination, overt or subtle, has no place in the institutions of Millstone. Evelyn Henderson wept quietly in the back row. She didn't look at Maya, but she didn't need to. The reckoning had come, not to destroy, but to reveal. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded again. Reporters jostled for position. Microphones thrust forward, questions overlapping. "Ms. Carter, how do you feel? Do you think this changes anything? What's next for you?" Maya stood before them, the same calm that at first made her go viral, now anchoring her. "Justice," she said softly, "isn't a destination. It's a daily act. You don't win it once. You live it." She didn't linger for cameras or interviews. Instead, she stepped through the crowd and walked down Main Street, the same street where she'd been followed, questioned, humiliated. Now, the town felt different. The same cracked sidewalks, the same storefronts, but something unseen had shifted. People looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. At Henderson's Market, the doors were boarded up. A handwritten note hung in the window, under new management. A local black family had bought it, Malik told her later. They planned to reopen it as a cooperative, a place that served everyone. The school board quietly reinstated Maya 2 weeks later, with back pay and a public apology. But she didn't rush to return. She took time, for herself, for her students, for the meaning of all this. When she finally walked back into the classroom, the children stood and applauded. One of her students, a quiet girl named Naomi, whispered as she hugged her, "You made them see us, Ms. Carter." That night, Maya sat on her porch again, watching the sunset melt into gold and purple. The magnolia tree swayed gently, its blossoms beginning to fall, soft as feathers. Across the street, Mrs. Callahan left a small basket on her porch, cornbread, a card, and a note that simply read, "Thank you for your grace." Her phone buzzed. A message from Renee Lawson. "Your story inspired a state senator to propose a bill requiring." Later, Malik joined her on the porch. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't hurt anymore. "You ever think it'd go this far?" he asked. Maya smiled faintly. "I never thought about far. I just thought about right." He nodded, watching the last light fade. "You gave this town a mirror. Not everyone liked what they saw, but some of them are still looking. That's how it starts." A car passed by, its headlights washing briefly over them. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. Maya leaned back, eyes lifting toward the night sky, vast, deep, and full of unseen constellations. "Maybe justice doesn't come all at once," she said quietly. "Maybe it comes in pieces like stars finding their way back to the dark." The wind carried her words down the street, through the quiet houses, past the courthouse and the shuttered store. A reminder, soft but enduring, that dignity was never a weakness, and silence could be its own kind of thunder. In Millstone, things would never be the same again. And in that truth, Maya Carter finally found peace.